Hey friends, welcome back to part 2 of my master bedroom makeover. It was supposed to be a quick weekend project, but somehow turned into a 6-month journey. In case you missed part 1, here's where we left off. Remove the old carpet, struggled a lot with the subfloor, we installed LVP flooring and painted the wall. We swapped out the outdated light fixture. And now it's time to add the finishing touches that will really bring this space together. Hey DIY friends, ready to transform your living space without breaking the bank? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Stephanie from Home with the Daniels. I'm here to empower you to turn your Pinterest dreams into reality one project at a time. Now let's get started on part 2 of this master bedroom makeover. So next we tackle the outdated trim and windowsill. Before removing the old trim around the window, I made sure to use a utility knife to cut through the caulk. This step helped minimize any potential damage to the drywall when I took off the trim. Next, I used my trim puller and hammer to carefully remove the trim. And here's a quick reminder, do not forget to wear ear protection because banging metal against metal can be very loud. Originally, I planned to simply trim down the windowsill and add a new trim around it. However, I quickly realized that making a perfect cut was nearly impossible. I struggled so much with this. I tried with my multi-tool and circular saw and I just could not get a straight cut because of the frame of the window. So I decided to just remove the old sill entirely and replace it with a new one. For the new sill, I used 1x4 prime pine, which I ripped to the correct width using my table saw. And then I secured it in place with my brad nailer. And now it's time for the trim around the window frame. I decided to make it 2 inches wide all around, so I used the same 1x4 prime pine and ripped it to the correct width using my table saw. Of course, the window frame wasn't perfectly square because why would it be? But nothing a little caulk and paint can't fix. And of course, we had to add shims behind the trim because the drywall wasn't perfectly straight either. This ended up creating a gap so the trim wouldn't sit flush against the wall. The more work we do in the house, the more I realize there's absolutely nothing is straight. We ended up with a gap between the pieces of trim at the top because the window frame wasn't the same size all around. So to fix that, we ended up using wood filler. Once everything was done, it was time to prime and paint the trim. I used the color Onyx by Benjamin Moore. It's almost identical to the black of the slat wall that we use. And of course, the most satisfying part is removing the painter's tape once it's all dry. I also did the same thing on the other window. I removed the windowsill, replaced it with a new piece, installed trim around the window, and painted it as well. Here's a sped up clip of the entire process. All the tools and the materials that I use will be linked in the description below. Before adding the panels, we installed the baseboards back in the room since we plan on having the panels go right on top of them. I decided to change my baseboards to something more modern like the one you see. Of course, there was a tricky angle like this one you see right here that took me forever to figure out. But once I learned how to figure out the angle, it was super easy. So I'll be sharing a video with all the details soon on how to figure out these tricky angles for the baseboards. You guys, my least favorite part when installing baseboard is all the caulking, but this caulk gun makes it so much easier. If you're going to be doing a lot of caulking, it's definitely worth every single penny. Now it was finally time to install the panels. I used these Acoustic black slat wall panels from Wood Veneer Hub, who kindly gifted them to me. I'll put all the information in the description below. These panels are super easy to install, but I will say can get a bit tricky when you're installing them along an entire wall, especially with window frames to account for. Because let's be for real, no wall in any house is straight. I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. Before deciding on the width of the window frame, I actually put up one of the panels up first to see how much space was left between the panel and the window. This helped me decide on the width for the window frame because I wanted to use a full panel to make life easier. This is me doing my happy dance because the first panel fit perfectly. If you do projects around the house, then you know things rarely fit perfectly, so you gotta celebrate those moments when they come. The most tedious part of this installation was having to cut some pieces at an angle because of course the walls aren't straight. If you're installing a full panel from floor to ceiling, it's not as difficult because you can push the panel up to the ceiling to ensure there are no gaps. The minimal gaps closer to the floor are barely noticeable. So this is me going back and forth between my miter saw and the wall, cutting, trying to get the perfect fit. And I had to stop before finishing because it was time to pick my son up from school. If you're wondering why I put a piece of painter's tape on the panel before cutting, it's so that the ends don't chip off and it stays smooth. Before finishing the panels, I installed new outlets on both sides so we could cut the panels to fit perfectly around them. I wanted outlets with USB and USB-C ports, so I replaced them with these black outlets to blend seamlessly with the panels. The outlets were super inexpensive and I love how they look. I will be sure to link them in the description. Here's a quick clip of me removing the old outlets and installing the new ones. Outlets are super easy to install, but always remember to turn off the power at the breaker first. And just a reminder, I'm not an electrician, so if you're unsure about the process, be sure to consult a professional. I also went ahead and replaced the other outlets in the room with similar black ones. The only difference is that these don't have the USB or USB-C ports, but the installation process is pretty much the same. I chose black outlets throughout the room because I thought they would create a nice contrast against the white walls. Here's a quick tip. Before you start removing the wires from the outlet, take a picture of how everything is connected. This way you'll have a reference when it's time to connect the new one. 4 days later, I was back at it again, putting up these panels. Because of how the window frame is located and how the last panel ended right here, then and at the edge, so I ended up having to cut a little bit of the next panel. So we removed the slat on the felt panel and cut the top and the bottom and cut some of the felt off so that it can fit perfectly in here. I'll show you how it ends up fitting like this. And what we did, we ended up painting this right here black, the top, so you wouldn't see it, and the top right here black as well. And we ended up painting the wall black because it wasn't cut perfectly, so you could kind of see some of the white walls, so that way this looks more aligned. Here's how I cut the panels to fit around the window frame. First, I removed one of the black MDF pieces completely by carefully removing the staples at the back that were holding it together. I used a pair of old nail cuticle trimmers for this, but you can use a small pair of metal snippers. Because of how the panels ended around the frame on the window, I didn't think it would look good to have the next panel, the next slat, like right up against the window frame, so I decided to remove one of the slats from the whole panel. I just removed the staples that were behind this felt right there, and I'm going to cut this. So I have a piece up here, a piece down here, and then nail it back into the felt. Well, I'll show you how it's gonna look like. Once that was done, we also cut off part of the felt with a utility knife, just like this. This is a clip of another piece we cut, but it's exactly the same process. After that, I used my nail gun with 5/8" nails to put the MDF piece back in place. If you do this, make sure to adjust the depth of your brad nailer so it doesn't go too deep. Also, don't apply too much pressure or it could puncture through the other side. So be sure to test it on a scrap piece first. And I did the same thing for both the top and the bottom piece. And this is what it looked like once it was done. And I don't know if you can see on the left side, close to the outlet, we had to cut a little piece of the felt off for the outlet to be able to fit perfectly. To install these panels, they recommend either using glue or screws. However, I never glue anything to my drywall because I don't want to deal with the damage if I ever decide to remove it. So I went with a combination of screws and nails. That said, if the panels are fitting snugly between your ceiling and baseboards or floors, nails alone won't be enough to hold them up. You will definitely need screws. The reason I didn't use all screws is just as a personal preference. The screws aren't the exact same color as the black felt on the panel, so they were a bit visible. It wasn't super noticeable, but I knew they were there and it bothered me. So that's why I used as few screws as possible and also used some nails. Day 3 of this panel installation. It took us 3 days between life getting in the way and all the tricky cuts we had to make. If you don't have any tricky cuts to deal with, you could easily install this in just a couple of hours. To cut the smaller piece you see being installed, we use a utility knife like you can see in this clip here. Just make sure you're using a new blade to ensure a clean cut. One of the trickiest part of this panel installation was getting the panel to fit around this outlet right here. This outlet ended up being right in the middle of a panel, so we had to figure out how to cut the panel to fit seamlessly around the outlet. My husband came up with the idea of covering the outlet with painter's tape and painting over it. Then we placed the panel over the painted outlet, which would leave an outline of the outlet, helping us know exactly where to cut. This is what it looked like after cutting the felt part of the panel to fit the outlet. We use a utility knife for that. As you can see, we also removed the pieces first and then we cut the inside using our Dremel. I'm sorry guys, I forgot to get a clip of us using the Dremel to cut the inside piece, but it was a lot of trial and error, but eventually we got it. Since we had some scrap pieces, it was okay. After that, I nailed the panel pieces back onto the felt. I used my brad nailer and 5/8" brad nails. Like I mentioned previously, if you do this, make sure to adjust the depth of your brad nailer so it doesn't go too deep. Also, don't apply too much pressure or it could puncture through the other side, and be sure to test it on a scrap piece first. You also want to make sure you align the pieces properly on the felt when nailing them back. Using clamps can help hold them in place like I did in the video. Sorry for the blurry clip guys, but I still wanted to show you all that we painted the inside section black so the brown part of the MDF wouldn't be visible. I used the color Onyx by Benjamin Moore. Seeing it fit perfectly was so satisfying. One part of the panel that we did struggle with was this part right over here. As you can see, it's wider because we ended up having to flip this panel over because I did not want this part to be right against the window frame. I thought it would look weird, but then we do have a gap here. So that's one thing that I actually still brainstorming, trying to figure out how we're gonna fix this. I might just have to like cut this a little bit more, maybe tilt it over. I don't know. Once I figure it out, I will share with you all because it's bothering me and it needs to be fixed. But for now, it's staying like this. This is what the panels look like once it was completely installed. Next, it was time to remove this door frame you see in the picture. I didn't record us removing it, but we ended up with some torn up drywall that we had to repair. I'm not pointing any fingers, but let's just say that someone didn't follow my instructions on how to remove the door frame. Before applying joint compound to fix a drywall, it's important to use a sealer first, especially if you can see the brown part of the drywall. If you don't, the joint compound might end up bubbling because it's water-based. Think of it like applying joint compound to cardboard. If it's not sealed first, it can bubble and tear. Once it was dry, it was time to apply the joint compound. Applying joint compound to the wall is not difficult. It just takes lots of practice to end up with a smooth surface. This is probably like my 10th time doing it, and I'm still not that great at it, although I keep getting better every time I do it. They do sell a pre-mixed joint compound, but I like to be able to mix a small batch myself whenever I need it. One bag will last you a long time if you're doing small patches throughout the house. I have purchased this bag over 3 years ago, and I'm still using the same bag. I'm not even halfway done with it yet. Once that was dry, it was time to sand down all the imperfections. I used a 220 grit sanding sponge. Next, I primed before painting. Make sure you don't skip priming or you will definitely regret it. Joint compound absorbs more paint, so if you don't prime, it can affect the sheen of the paint and you will clearly see where the joint compound was applied, and we don't want that. After the primer was dry, I painted, then moved on to installing the new door frame. I painted the door frame trim a couple of days prior so it would be ready to go. You can paint your door frame trim after installing them, but I prefer doing it before so I don't have to worry about taping the wall and getting paint on it. The hardest part about putting up a door frame trim is aligning it properly, which can be tricky because chances are the door frame itself isn't perfectly straight. Next, it was time to remove the old door and install the barn door. I won't go into all the details of how we installed the barn door because I'm planning to share a more detailed video about it soon. So here's a sped up clip of us installing it. We were able to get it done in about 2 hours. 177 days later, we finally installed these motorized blackout blinds. And let me tell you, we had the best night's sleep that night. Both my husband and I need complete darkness to sleep, so sleeping without blinds or curtains for a long time was rough on us. Blackout was kind enough to send us these blinds for our room. We installed them in my son's room a few months back, and they have been amazing. These are the first blackout blinds that I've come across that actually block out all the light, like no light at all is filtering in. What makes them awesome is that these blinds are custom made to fit your window frame, so you actually measure your window frame before you order the blinds. I will do a review video on them soon, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. The last thing we did was add some finishing touches, like this new doorknob that I installed. Replacing your old doorknob to something newer and more modern, it's such an easy and affordable way to upgrade your space. And also this new doorstop. We still have a couple more things to finish in the room because, of course, why would I do something crazy like finish the room 100%? 95% club over here. Some of the things I need to finish are the door frame trim for this door over here, adding a new light switch, that's why the cover is not on, but honestly I probably would just put the cover on until I can change the light switch, and also need to finish the baseboard right over here, which I can't finish until I do the door frame first, and I also want to paint this door. So let's see if we can finish this hopefully this year. And that wraps up the master bedroom makeover. There's still a little bit of work left, but I love how it turned out and it's way better than I imagined. So be sure to stay tuned for part 3 where I'll be finishing the last 5%, hopefully in 2025. In the meantime, enjoy these clips of the 95% complete room. I'll be posting all the links to the products I use down in the description. You can also find them on the blog. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.